This one is by Snyder, who's the principal software engineer at Shoreline. So,
Great. So as you may know, today is a very special day. We've got Pi Day, right? Oh, yeah. And because of Pi Day and baking, and because of bun, you know, bun has a lot of. Can you time me up? Bun has a lot of puns around baking, like their config file is the bunfig file. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to be very memorable with you. And yeah, can you let's see if I can even. Well, yeah, can we get this one off? All right. That's good. Clicker works underneath. Okay. So every day I write code. It looks like it's going to have the printer all of a sudden. There we go. Maybe that's off now. All right. So I write code every day, and oh, now it's doing something else. You guys probably can't even see it, but I can actually oh, it's tired. All right, there we go. So I'm also a co-founder of Utah.js. So we do conferences in Utah, and we have a lot of really good talent there. And I feel humbled and blessed to be there with guys like the TanStack team and Remix guys and Kenzie Dodds with this Epic React. So it's a really great area to enjoy JavaScript. And really trying. I think that it's too much interference. All right, and my website is kencoder.com. Happy Pi Day. So what is Shoreline? Well, we try to reduce no-shows, costs, and increase operational efficiency. And we do it with patient education, patient acquisition, wayfinding, and doctor bio clips. So it's a really fun thing. We've been around for just a couple of years, and so we are talking to customers all over the US, and it's a really fun place to work. So today, what we'll cover, first off, what is Bun? How many people have heard of Bun? How many people have used it? All right, Oliver, great. You can correct me on anything here. Especially next, I'm going to talk about what is a runtime. So I got a slide for that. Yeah. And we'll talk about why you should care. Why does it even matter that I'm talking about this? That might be a good thing to cover before I really get into it. And then we're going to talk about 10 features that Bun has and all of the good reasons to use them. And this just at the end, getting started, which really, I mean, all you have to do is go to bun.sh, which is their website. And overall, it is a new JavaScript runtime. So it's similar to Deno or Node, but it's brand new. And it also takes a lot of ideas from Cloudflare workers. It's written in a programming language called Zig, which is kind of a spiritual successor to C, so it's very low level and very fast. For the JavaScript engine that actually runs the JavaScript, it uses Apple's engine, which is JavaScript Core. There's pretty much just 3 or 4 that are real popular, and they chose to use Apple JavaScript Core. The main difference with V8 is it's really similar in the speed. Supposedly, JavaScript Core has a lower startup time, so there may be some advantage there with speed. So let's go over this. This can be kind of confusing. So when you think about what is JavaScript and how does it get run, so we have this idea of a thing called runtime. So in our tooling, we have things like TypeScript that we are, let's see, how should I scan over here maybe? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we have things like TypeScript, which is in our chain of tooling. When you're using with Node, it's completely outside of the runtime, right? So you have some kind of compiler. The standard compiler, the Microsoft official compiler, is in TypeScript, but they just released a new one in Go, which is supposedly 10 times faster, which that will translate into directly when you're coding and it's running to compile things into type check. It's going to be way faster. So Bun has also done that. They've written one in Zig. They've included it inside of the runtime. So when you execute a file, it can be a TypeScript file, and it will just automatically incrementally compile the code for you. You don't have to have a build step. So there's the engine part, which for Node is V8, and for Bun is JavaScript core. And then next to it, you have the core modules. And what are those? It's like HTTP, net, file system, all that kind of stuff. And so those are things that are written in C, C++, and they are completely custom to the runtime. So V8 is the same thing that Chrome uses, and it can be shared with Chrome. But the modules are specific to the runtime. So in the browser, the main modules are like the window, all the different things that you can do with window and fetch and the DOM, manipulating the DOM, all that is built into Chrome runtime. And so when you think about also the tools that you need to use with the runtime, these are kind of covered in these bottom three. So for Node, you're going to use a package manager, either NPM, PNPM, or Yarn. They're all written in JavaScript. So they're going to be a little bit slow, as opposed to Bun, where it's using Zig. And why is it slow? There's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is because JavaScript's, or I should say Node's HTTP implementation is really slow. And there's some limitations to what you can do in JavaScript. As far as parallelization and other things that you can, that Bun takes advantage of in Zig to make it faster. One of the things you've got to make with your code base is a test runner. And so usually people use Jest or Vitest. And those are written in JavaScript, or depending on if you're using ESBuild with it, then there's also the Go component to your test runner. But in Bun, it has a test runner with it, and it's compatible with Vitest. And it's a really sweet way to just not have this test component in your code base. And then you have to think of like the bundler and HMR, and there's some things going on in that world, like roll down is coming out. So Vue said, hey, we love this ESBuild, but the problem is it doesn't really have an HMR kind of situation. So we are going to create a new bundler, and Bun already has a bundler. So it created that with it, and you can do an HMR instead of using Vite, which is kind of cool. And just to kind of compare, like I was mentioning with Chrome, the Chrome browser runtime, it has a few extra things that I've highlighted in gray. The DOM APIs are different. It doesn't have file system and net and things like that are computer resources, but it has all the APIs that you work with the DOM. And then, of course, it has to include rendering in CSS, and that's part of a different part. I will mention that the developer tools, so they're specific to each browser. Chrome's developer tools are for Chrome, and then for Bun, you can actually do a WebKit inspector. So you can bring up Safari, and there's some other tools you can use to actually inspect the code. Any questions on all that? That's a lot.
I was a little curious. So I mean, I understand, JavaScript has to run inside some kind of runtime, right? What's it running in when it's doing like the package manager and the test runner? Because is that just more Node, or?
Yeah, it's running in Node.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime you use one of those, Node has to be installed. Yeah, so Deno and Bun because they're not using Node, they don't rely on it, then they're not using stuff like NPM. Yes.
So you can, with Node, you can choose, your bundler and your test. It's like a package. Can you do that with Bun, or you have to use what they give you?
You can still use NPM stuff.
Okay.
You don't have to. And in fact, their bundler is probably not mature enough that it could totally replace your use of Vite, because it has plugins and all these different things. And if you're using TanStack or Remix, you're going to have to use Vite, stuff like that. So it kind of feels like that they're trying to completely replace that or make it so similar that you could just have your choice when you set up to whether you use Bun bundler or Vite bundler, because they act the same. I don't know. Yeah.
Does Bun allow for the use and installation of command line interfaces for projects that can be used for generating a brand new project in that framework, like for example the CLI that Angular has?
Yes, it does. We'll get that to the end. So that was a good point. Okay, let's see. So let's talk about why you should care about this. So obviously, if you're in the TypeScript world, it is appealing to know that you don't have to do any kind of compilation. You can just immediately run the JavaScript. So that's a plus. But I don't think that's the killer feature. Maybe this has to be the site. Let's try that. One thing that they've done different than Deno is Bun strives for 100% node compatibility. And right now, I would characterize it somewhere around 98%. But if you go look at it, we've tackled, obviously, or unsurprisingly, all the things that people most commonly use. So it's going to be kind of a really rare situation that it's not going to be compatible, which is really cool. Because you can just start using it inside your project. And that's basically what we did. That's not the killer feature, though. There's also this idea that it's going to be faster in many ways, especially the core libraries, because they're in Zig. And I don't think that's the killer feature either. I think the killer feature is that it's a totally new vision for what the JavaScript ecosystem is doing. And I think they may have even been pushed by Bun, but they're certainly all kind of on this path where people are going, hey, we need to write these tools that we use every day, these things that run a lot, that need to be fast. Let's get them into Rust and Go and make them faster. So what is the vision? We can replace the slow parts of the ecosystem. So roll down or the Bun bundler, they're going to make the developer experience much faster because everything is going to be compiled really fast. And actually, they have some other really interesting things we'll talk about later, but they're even saying hey, Semver, everybody uses Semver. Why don't we produce a Zig or a version of Semver and include it in Bun? And so that's kind of a really neat kind of vision that they have. So that's what will end up giving you reduced size in your node modules. And of course, that makes things faster at development and at deploy. But it's basically saying these things that are essentially type or feature complete, let's just get them out of the node modules. Let's put them in a runtime. And we see that if you look at Solid and Astro and Quick, they're also embracing JSX. So it's not just React. And what's cool about Bun is they just natively support JSX. So you can have a file that has TSX file and it runs perfectly inside Bun, which is really cool. And you can skip the compilation step like we mentioned before. And I don't know if anybody else has gotten into this, but I feel like there's some spots where you get into this hell where you're trying to figure out what's TypeScript and what's not, and how you build and how you run something on the server, and how you have to worry about is something in CommonJS or ES module and all of the crap that goes with it. What's nice is that Bun supports import and require. all the time, anytime, everywhere. And so you never have to think about whether you're doing ESM or CJS, which I think is what, I think that Node not doing that was a big mistake. I think they should have just made it interoperable from the beginning. And this idea of we're trying to give you all in one, the tooling with the bun runtime. So where did it come from? In 2021, it was version 0, 2023, it was version 1, and as of today, it's 1.25. And we use Bun in production. So we have a Remix web application that's been running in Bun for about 6 months. And then we have an API that saves video streams and processes videos with FFmpeg. And that's written in Bun, and that's been in production about 2 years. So these are the 10 features we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the packages that they've taken up in NPM that are huge and what they're actually doing with them to replace it. We'll talk about how to use it as a package manager, how to use it for unit testing. We'll talk about this interesting idea of the Bun shell, which you may not have heard about, but is a really cool developer tool. They also support SQLite, so Deno also made that decision to bake in SQLite, and they didn't really write it from scratch. They took some implementation in C and used that, but it's all integrated into the environment, so it's really nice to use. They do have hot reloading. Some of the built-ins they have are better. So they've adopted the same kind of standard that Cloudflare Workers and Deno did, where you have a server and you get a real request object and you have to return a real response object. It's much easier to work with, and you don't necessarily need something like Express, because it's just easy to deal with. We'll talk about why you might be interested in using their REPL, their command line tool, to actually run code immediately. We'll talk about their bundler and this thing that they have, bun init, which you might have been alluding to, which allows you to initialize a new project really easily. All right, so I'm going to show you a few packages here that all together add up to 56 megabytes in your Node modules folder. So the biggest one is Semver. So pretty much everything on NPM and Node NPM itself use Semver. So you're going to get 300 million downloads every week of that. But with Bun, you can just auto replace it so that it will use the Bun's Semver. There's glob and fast glob that everybody uses, but Bun has a built-in glob primitive that you can use. There's even things, utilities like string width, which CLIs use to be able to put things into columns and stuff. And it's like, why are we downloading that all the time? Other things that you may not have heard of, GetStream, SQLite, Chokidar, that's to watch for file changes. The .env also, basically Node is adopting this. I don't know if it's exactly which version, but one of the newest versions has this idea where anytime there's a .env folder or file inside the folder that you're running it will automatically load those as environmental variables. So Bun does that automatically. You don't have to use TS Node, which I found really tricky if you want to run Node or you want to run TypeScript from Node. Things like deep equal, Postgres. And Postgres is a big one because you think about what needs to be fast in your application. Talking to the database should be really fast. You know, we're optimizing our SQL queries so that they run in a matter of milliseconds. And if our interface to the network and the database is written in JavaScript, it's going to be slow. So they've said, this was actually in their release this month, that they announced that PG, which is pretty much everybody uses for Postgres, is built in. And a few others that you really don't have to use, you know, because Bun includes bcrypt and argon2 if you ever directly work with passwords. And then on the ecosystem side, obviously you don't have to use Node or NPM. You don't need NPX. You don't need Jest or PyTest. You don't need Istanbul, which is the code coverage. Code coverage is built into the Bun testing suite. You don't have to use ESBuild because Bun includes the bundler. And basically, when you think about all of the different add-ons that come on, we'll talk about this later, but Bun has a really cool way to work with other code like C code or Rust that's super easy. So here's an example of them bragging about how fast PG is, Postgres, and you can see that there's definitely a need for it. So next thing, talking about the package manager. So the reason why their package manager is so fast is a few things. One, they parallelize. Two, they use faster file system primitives. And three, they do a lot more network parallelization. So in my experience, it really is this much of a difference, and it's really crazy sometimes. So here's, like, for me, example was installing Vite. With Node, it took let's see, that's Bun first. Took just over a second, and in Node, it took almost, NPM, it took almost 6 seconds. So you can imagine when you have a huge list of dependencies coming out, it really makes it faster because they're all going in parallel and being written in a faster language. So if you use the Bun unit testing framework, it replaces PyTest and Istanbul, and right there you're going to save 45 megabytes. All right, Bun Shell. This is a really cool, interesting thing that they've done. So I don't know if you've seen a lot of packages like this. They use things like crossenv, .env, and rimwrap, and those basically allow you to make sure that these commands, these scripts, work the same on Windows as they do on Mac and Linux. And so there's all these compatibility things. And really, there's actually a ton of things that you can do, and probably people do in the scripts. Like if you have stars or pipes or redirection, any of those things don't work on Windows. And so people created these NPM scripts, NPM libraries to kind of handle that for you. And what Bun is saying is, hey, let's get rid of these and also handle all of the symbols that you see in Linux. And what happens? Well, your package JSON shrinks a lot. You don't need those dependencies, and all of the stuff that you do in scripts is much quicker. And the reason, or I guess the idea of it, is that what runs in scripts here is not really shell. It's called Bun, what is it called? I can't remember, we talked about it earlier, but basically it's actually something that is compatible with Linux and new tools. And so you can actually use pretty much anything you're used to in Linux, and it will just work in there. So it actually goes further. They expose a $ primitive that allows you to actually write code that works across all systems. So for example, you can create a buffer object and put it in string interpolation inside of your command. And obviously echo hello world will not work exactly the same everywhere. Maybe echo does, but a lot of other things. Well, so we've got this, the redirection. Yeah, so you can't redirect the same way in Windows. And so this is the nice way, and it'll actually work with objects if you want to use it inside of JavaScript. And you can also create or run basic shell. If you have a shell already that you use, you can run it in Bun and it'll work on any of the platforms. And so here's just kind of a preview. This is probably more commands than I know in Linux, but they support all of these. Any questions on that?
I have a question. So when you're using these commands, are you then just sort of I'll call it a virtual terminal within the environment rather than your actual terminal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And of course, these kinds of things, blob expansion, braces, variable redirection, piping, those are all supported the same way they are in Linux. All right, let's talk about SQLite. So I don't know if you've seen the syntax with the with on an import, but that is something that's coming and getting more support even across Node. But the idea is that you can import something as SQLite and directly use it right there. And so it could be a really cool way, especially in embedded situations, for you to be able to have your own SQLite database that sits along inside your code. And you can do even more things with it. You can create a database in memory, and that could be really useful to use the SQLite API without necessarily having a full database. And then they illustrate this idea of the using keyword with their SQLite. So Bun supports the using keyword, and actually Chrome just released this week that they supported it as well. And the idea of the using is you use it to declare a variable like a const, but it will automatically call a function to dispose of that resource when it goes out of scope. So for example, you can use the braces here to define this is the scope, which is already a thing. And then whenever you leave that scope, whenever the code finishes in that scope, then those resources will be disposed of. So for example, if you want to do it with two different resources, the existing boilerplate is really complicated because you have to do a finally on both and make sure that they close in the right order. Whereas with using, you just say using and it's going to handle everything. So it's mostly sugar, but it's a really cool idea. So with hot reloading, you can do two kinds, basically a watch where it just reruns your full script on change, or hot where it updates code, classes and functions in place, but keeps the same general memory. Yes.
So I have a question about the hot reloading. So when you do the dash hot option, so if you're running like a server on it, will the server like keep running while it updates the code? Because like the only languages I've seen do that is like anything related to Elixir and the language that's based off.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you can use it in production. I think it's mostly for in development, but they do brag about the fact that you can have an HTTP server open and you can replace functions in that HTTP server or change the routing or whatever, and it will still be running. It won't mess with any connections, just maintain and kind of switch over automatically. All right. Other questions? So I don't know if you've used NodeMon or PM2 like in a production situation where you need to make sure that things don't, if they crash, that the JavaScript process starts up again and Bun automatically handles that. They even implement the import meta hot, which I don't know if Vite created it, but it does work the same as Vite. So library authors can use it to actually do custom behavior when there is a hot reload. So let's talk about some of the built-in core modules that are better. So BunServe, as I mentioned before, super easy to use. They have a file system where it's kind of a lazy loaded object representing a file that you can do all these things with. The tooling or the interface around creating processes is much, much better. And so it's nice that they've kind of created that. They also have password hashing. You can use eCrypt or Argon 2. And they have a lot of stream tools, even just like regular functions that convert different types of streams to others, which if you go look on NPM, there's dozens of libraries that people have to use to convert the different kinds of streams. And they also implemented Cloudflare's HTML rewriter, which allows you to stream in any HTML and process it with in an object-oriented way. And it can even be like while stuff is happening in a streaming way, and you can use it to do various rewrites. They also have blob built in, which is really nice. I mentioned Sendware before. They also just released a S3 compatible file storage. So if you use S3, you don't need any extra libraries. It works exactly the same as the JavaScript SDK does from Amazon, but it's faster. There's also better networking stuff if you want to do just port, serving something on a port. It has a nice interface for that. It has a bunch of stuff on import meta, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and the form function interface, which is basically a way for you to run external code. So Button actually includes a C compiler in it, so you can run C code just by doing this small definition of what the code has in it. And you can just, without doing the compilation step, Bun will take the C and run it for you. So for people who build these, add-ons and modules and things like that need to be faster, Bun's already ready to go with that. It's a little bit more work if you're using Rust or another language, but if you ever look at how the Node system does it, it is at least like 3 files that are just descriptive of what's happening. It's a lot of boilerplate. So the example they give with BunServe saying, Express isn't great, but people use it. And just to kind of illustrate how fast the network stack is on Bun, they show that it can run 2.5 times as fast as Deno or Node. And the other cool thing is they support WebSocket integrated into the BunServe. So you don't need Socket.io or anything. It's super easy to use it and just connect to it directly with WebSocket. In the browser, you can use WebSocket to connect to it, and you don't need anything else NPM library. Any questions? Cool. So here's an example of WebSockets with Bun. There's a few different things you can do. In this case, we just have open, which is the initial connection. You can do something with the user. And actually, it also automatically tracks the user. So there's this WS object, and it's unique to every user. So you can have data that sits on there, and then you can differentiate your users. So it's super easy not to have to worry about Socket.io or anything like that. Here's an example of messing with the file. It's lazy, so the minute you read .size, then it's going to actually go find out the size. And you can get the contents in various formats, similar to the way the blob format works or response object work. So if you've done a fetch, you may be familiar with like saying await result.text. And so it's a similar kind of situation for files. Here's an example of using the spawn sync. You basically just get an object that has, buffers on it for standard error and standard out. There we go. This is an example of the S3 client. Button brags that theirs is over 5 times faster in terms of downloading lots of files in parallel. And just using the Bun network stack instead of the Node network stack makes a huge difference. And then here's the import meta. It hasn't been implemented everywhere, which is frustrating because you'll see a lot of code like this at the top, where to get the current directory name of the file you're in, it takes 3 long lines. But Bun, doesn't matter if you're in ES, in a module or comma.js, you still get the import.meta. And it has things like directory file, path, URL, name, and even the standard doesn't have .main, which can be really useful. And you can also use it to resolve the actual paths to different things. It's very simple to do passwords. Basically, you just tell it what algorithm you want and the cost. This was their example. Do not use a cost of 3 or 4. I think the number is like 13 or 14 now. So don't look at this exactly, but it's really easy to create the hash and then verify the hash. This example I was mentioning with the foreign function interface, all you would need to do is you create this C program, and then you have this little bit of boilerplate that defines what things are in there. So you can see where it says symbols and then hello, basically saying export the hello function back into JavaScript. So you could just run hello in JavaScript. So this could be this hello.js that you're running. That could be run with Bun without any compilation step. It's just going to auto compile it for you and auto run it. So it's really handy if you're trying to work with lower level things. Another thing I really like, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times I want to know how a package works, or I'll go into the Node REPL. And this is what happens. Let's say you want to know in Lodash, how does it handle map on objects? Arrays is pretty obvious, but what do they do for objects? So I go into Node and you say, okay, let's import Lodash. Oh wait, cannot use import statement in the REPL. Why don't you use a dynamic import? So do that. And then it says module not found. Like, oh, it won't auto install it. So in Bun, it will auto install. So if you come into the REPL, and it'll be just for that REPL session that it's auto installing. But you can just install anything. So if you're ever on Node, you're like, I want to see how this actually works. You can just do Bun REPL, go in there, import it, and it's automatic. So it's really helpful for that kind of thing. Here's what they put for the bundler. I mentioned that roll down, Vite is working on roll down, which is supposed to be really fast too, but right now Vite uses ESBuild, which you can see why it's so much faster. But Bun is trying to take that even to the next level. And it does have the same API as ESBuild. It's faster than ESBuild. So theoretically, I don't know if anyone's done this, but you could write a small translation layer so that you could use with Vite. You could use Vite with Bun's version of the bundler rather than ESBuild. And that may happen sometime. But you can definitely see why we've left Webpack. It is super slow. And it also supports cool stuff like loaders, plugins, macros, and executables, which can be really useful for a lot of situations. Another thing, they do have this init, so it's kind of like create React app, or the new one, which is just create Vite. It asks you what kind of template. You can do a blank one, React, or a library, which is basically just nothing specific in it. And with React, you have 3 choices. You can do blank, Tailwind, or Shad CDN Tailwind. So that's kind of cool. And when you do it, it says all you got to do now is do bun dev or bun run build, bun start, and it's a full HMR. It acts a lot like Vite in that way. So you can even use it if you're super brave. You can do that without the Vite ecosystem. Yeah.
Are they going to expand it to other frameworks like Angular or Vue?
Yeah, they could. I don't know. what the plan is. So you can go to bun.sh to get the download command, but it's super easy. You can basically create a server just like this. Obviously, you don't have any routing here, so that's what you want to add. But a lot of things like Hono work in Bun as well. Hono works in Bun, Deno, Node, and Cloudflare workers. So you can use something like that. But I really like it because you get an actual request object and you return an actual response object. There's a lot of power to that. So I got it into we were running or writing this, and we said let's just use straight up bun serve, and like the routing got more and more complicated until I ended up making a routing framework called Bunshine. So it looks a lot like Express, but you deal with real request objects and real response objects. And it also includes the socket server. So what you can do is you can have a socket path or route, and that just works alongside all of your other routes, and it's super easy to use. So if you want to see the slides for this, you can go to this bit.ly or you can scan this. Any other questions we have? Yeah.
Also, thank you so much for this. I learned so much. Did you run into like any surprises or gotchas running Bun in production?
Yeah, so the first little bit, there were some, but in the last year, there haven't been any for me. Yeah. So there were little hiccups like a regression or like, what was it? I can't remember right now, but yeah, there's a few little things that will break. Like, oh, that was one of them. You couldn't return to a head response. You couldn't return something with a content length unless it had body. So most people don't do that anyway. It's like a really kind of niche thing, but that's the proper standard, is to be able to set on head requests what the actual size of the resource is if you were to request it. So like we had a thing where somebody was downloading from our server and the head said it was content length 0. And so they assumed that the file wasn't there. Yeah.
I remember when Deno kind of first came on the scene and they were talking about like advantages of edge computing, and but they may have covered some of that with Bun here, but I didn't know if you could like offer any more insight on that, or what advantages that would provide in either Deno or Node.
For running at the edge?
Yeah, it seemed like that was like one of their taglines, but I haven't really heard much about that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Vercel and Cloudflare. I don't know if there's any, Deno might offer one, I don't know. But it's certainly an idea that you can run faster stuff on the edge, and the startup time is really good.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was integrated somehow, or that I know you mentioned Cloudflare.
Yeah, no, I think Deno, most of what they did, they were born out of this idea that they wanted TypeScript. They also wanted some security that isn't in Node, which I think has not really panned out the way they wanted. I don't really like the security model on Deno. And they're also rewriting a lot of slow themes, because like Deno has Deno serve, which is the same kind of theme as Bun. Question over here?
I was wondering what kind of pushback did you encounter trying to convince your team to use Bun, and how'd you get over? How'd you get them convinced?
I am a one-man shop, so it's very easy to reach consensus. Yeah, no, it was mostly put it on the test server and see if it crashes, and it didn't. Yeah.
Do you know if the Deno comparisons in these slides, were they Deno 1 or 2?
These were like, I pulled these up this week, so they're very new. Yeah.
Are you at a point in your relationship with Bun where, like, I mean, this is a commercial venture, right? Like, have you had the need to actually contact them for support? And how have you felt about that, if you have?
Yeah, they have a Discord server, which has been pretty responsive. They have some official people answering questions, but then there's just tons of people in the community that are asking questions. I don't know if they have paid support yet. I know they don't have the same kind of web services that Deno offers. So I'm not exactly sure how they're gonna make money. Obviously, it's open source and free. So we'll see.
Okay.
Other questions? Well, thanks so much, everyone. If you have questions after, you can catch me in the hall.